We're now joined live via Zoom by Dan Perry, International Affairs Analyst and former Europe and Mideast Editor of the Associated Press. And we're also going to be joined as well by Brigadier General in the Reserves, Hanan Geffen, who is here in studio, former commander of the Shmonim Time Intelligence Unit. First, Dan, let's start with you. It's too bad you're not in the studio with us, but you have very strong opinions about this. And I just, what does this mean? Like, what does these warrants mean, and how can it be withheld? Because if they can't go to 125 countries, where can they go?
Well, for Netanyahu, you can still go to the U.S., which is not a member nation. They're only liable for arrest in member nations, but liability does not mean it's going to happen. For example, Britain is a member nation, but Britain has already announced that they think this is a wrong move and have urged it not happen. And so in reality, the danger is that various countries that they travel to might agree to arrest them. And this can be probably organized before they go. So it's an inconvenience, but I wouldn't diminish the precedent setting aspect. And it must also be noted that the selective nature of this is really kind of mind bending. Consider that the ICC has been investigating Afghanistan, which is a member nation, the Taliban in Afghanistan for 20 years, and they haven't yet got it together to indict a single Taliban member. That was obviously a decision. And plenty of critics will say that that decision was because they fear attacks by Islamic fundamentalist terrorists. Note that it is also precedent setting that they indicted Hamas. Up until now, they had never indicted Arab Islamist terrorists, not Hamas, not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, not the Islamic Republic of Iran, not Hezbollah. It really is kind of amazing that they've taken this precedent-setting step. Whether or not it actually leads to arrests, it's certainly bold, and it exposes the court to charges of selective justice. If indeed member nations agree to take it seriously and start refusing to guarantee Netanyahu and Gallant that they won't be arrested if they travel, let's say, to Paris. If that is the process that starts to happen, then it kind of changes much about the global strategic situation, because no country will be able to prosecute a war without fearing some similar thing.
Right.
The U.S. killed plenty of civilians unintentionally in its wars in Iraq and in Afghanistan, Pakistan. Plenty of civilians have been killed by every party involved in Syria. No one ever contemplated issuing arrest warrants. So I have to think that for Khan to have done this kind of is part of the global pressure campaign to get Israel to behave differently after 8 months in this war. It's inescapable that this is a political decision that is highly selective, highly subjective, but not without potentially some basis in the laws that the ICC is trying to enforce. As I say, however, very selectively and very subjectively. And one last thing, generally, we only find out about indictments once the judges agree to the prosecutor's request to indict. It has never before occurred that the prosecutor, whether Khan or his predecessor Ocampo or any of them, have gone out to the media to announce they're going to appeal for arrest warrants. And the judges privately are not happy about this at all, because this puts enormous pressure on them, changes the entire process that the ICC has respected during the 20-some years of existence. And there will be so many questions about why Khan has done it this way. One last thing, the Republicans are extremely unhappy about this in the U.S. If Trump comes back to power, I think they're gonna take the fight to the ICC. Remember, the U.S. is not a member nation, and the U.S. has asked for Americans to have exemptions from member nations, and the U.S. is seriously not a fan of the ICC. You can expect a Republican administration, even a Republican Senate, to go after the ICC and start issuing various moves against perhaps the prosecutor, which they have threatened to do in the past.
Wow. All right, we'll be back with you in a second. I'm going to bring in Hanan Geffen here. You've been hearing Dan Perry speak, and I know you have a lot to add, so tell us.
Yeah, I have 3 remarks to make. One, and it's immediate. We have seen the effect on the Israeli public. It's kind of united the Israeli public. If in the morning it was a public divided between left and right and in the government and threatening to leave the government, suddenly within minutes it changed, the atmosphere, the movie changed. The other thing is we have to wait and see the other reaction besides the Brits that already said that are not happy, what the Germans said, what the French will say, what the other countries that understand it. On top of it, and this is the third remark, they are taking Yahya Sinwar, the head of a terror organization, a recognized terror organization by the US and others, Germany, Brits, recognized, and taking him as a legal leader, a legal entity, a legal that is can face justice in the international court, giving him, it is kind of recognition in Yahya Sinwar. Now we see all these, and we'll see it within days, 1 or 2 days, we see all the answer coming in the Israeli public, the international public, and the way they will treat Hamas.
Wow, that's an interesting point of view. And you know, Dan, one other thing, I know you've written a big opinion piece on this, but you're saying, you even said that it could be, the selective justice could end up helping the prime minister politically.
Yeah.
How so?
Yeah.
Well, just as Hanan said, Netanyahu was incredibly beleaguered. And Netanyahu has been looking for anything to change the narrative from October 7th, for new events to happen. This is a major new event. It is a major that potentially, just as Hanan said, could unite the Israeli public behind him, or at least on this issue. And potentially, that might help him crawl back to the level of support he had before the war in Israeli public opinion. I wrote an op-ed on CNN last week, urging the ICC not to do this because A, it's clearly political, and B, which hurts their own reputation, and B, politically it could backfire by helping, which I'm fairly certain is not the intention of the ICC nor of the various outside parties that I'm sure were pressuring Khan to take this move. So it's extremely dubious. It might backfire. It's a distraction from the main thing. But it does set interesting precedents by outlawing terrorism. It's about time that they did that. As I say, for reasons inexplicable, they failed to take action against the Taliban. Now they're taking action against Hamas. And by the way, the charges against Hamas seem stronger because it's kind of an open and shut case about Hamas, because they threatened and to do this and bragged that they would do it again and filmed themselves, and it's not really conceivable that they would be found not guilty. Whereas if the charges against Netanyahu are mainly starvation, it'll be possible to prove that no one is starved. Not that there isn't a humanitarian disaster in Gaza. One more thing I really should add, you're going to hear, I think, from a lot of commentators, a lot of countries, not just Britain, a questioning of the jurisdiction issue, because the ICC is basically a club of 124 countries, which doesn't include some very major countries. They try to make the law among themselves and for others, but it isn't widely recognized that they can. They can only admit other nation states. Palestine is not a state. There's a certain procedure to admit states. The ICC short-circuited their own procedure by admitting Palestine in a blitzkrieg move by the judges only, not by the wider Council of States, in a way that many countries never accepted, for the simple reason, as I say, that Palestine is not a state. Moreover, to have jurisdiction, one must be talking about particular territory. Even if we accept that Palestine is holistically a state, it doesn't have recognized territory. Indeed, Hamas does not suffice with the West Bank and Gaza for Palestine's territory. They claim all of Israel is Palestine's territory. This has to be decided by negotiation or by some other body than 3 judges sitting in The Hague. The notion that Palestine's borders are going to be determined by 3 judges in The Hague is patently absurd. And the negotiation, the investigation that this is based on actually began in, I believe, 2018 or several years ago, well before this war. So they have been investigating Israel's actions in general. It has been widely seen in international jurisprudence as a bit of a joke. We'll have to wait and see what the actual indictments are. But just purely on juridical procedure and precedent, this looks incredibly illegitimate and has the effect of appearing to be a political action. And by the way, the first case of the ICC taking action against the leader of a democratic country.
All right, Dan Perry, thank you very much.